Hello, and welcome back to the Aural Mess podcast. I'm joined this week by musician Max Begler. Max is in the band Sunny Daze and the Weathermen. How's it going, Max?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good, thanks. So, yeah, I mean, jumping right into your band, I'm blown away. You know, I was listening to it right before we started recording, and wow, knocked my socks off.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So, why don't you tell us just a bit more about yourself, and then we can definitely talk about this album.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Max. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm still a current resident of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have been playing guitar for probably like 10 years, maybe a little over that, off and on. And then when COVID started, I ended up starting a COVID band with a buddy of mine. And just in the last 2 years, really kind of nailed down everything, got enough people that were crazy enough to start playing together with me. And then slowly over time managed to put together a band and added members, got rid of members, and then finally, got to a place that was steady enough that we were playing. And it's changed lineups a little bit over the last 2 years since we started. But it's we're a 6-piece band, all based out of Pittsburgh, and we just put out our first album.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Like I said, I just listened, 13 songs, just over 35 minutes, fast and furious. And I hear so many influences and so many styles just within that 35-minute album that I'm still sitting here like blown away. So tell me a bit more about, your influences, the band, and how you wrote these songs and came to record them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I can't possibly talk about my influences without talking about my parents. So much of my music taste, at least the baseline of it, really came from my mom and dad. They are both born in the late 50s, like had the entirety of the 60s. They had my mom had her older brother who was a huge music junkie. Just both really, children of the 60s, lovers of late 60s and 70s music. And so a lot of, the Doors, the Rolling Stones, I got a lot of Beatles. I got just a lot of that, the like pop charts of the 60s and 70s growing up. Tons and tons of just CDs and listening to, classic rock on the radio and the whole nine yards. But a lot of my own personal influences really came from the last like 5 years. Right after I got out of college. I mean, I when I was in college, I kind of got more into like, I would say alternative rock, a lot of punk. I got into a lot of more classic rock and roll. So like late 50s stuff. And then when I got out of college, I really started deep diving into garage rock.
Yeah.
And really found a love with the lost one-hit wonders of the 1960s and a lot of the garage rockers that would come out of that time. Like 13th Floor Elevators, MC5, the Stooges. Not that those are really any lost ones, but I mean, even deeper than that, Mysterian and the Question Marks, things like that. All of the really, the really garage rock staples as it was. And then from there, when I was forming my band Sunny Daze and the Weathermen, me and my drummer started to connect on the new garage rock movement that comes out of like the late 90s and 2000s. I very recently had started deep diving into bands like the OCs, Ty Segall, even bands like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, which I want to say for the record, When I started the band Sunny Days and the Weathermen, I did not listen to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. The names have no connection. I just liked the way that they sounded. And the styles had no connection either, even though they started off as a garage band also. But I really did develop like a love of the fuzz, fast charged, just sticky, nightmarish, bluesy, surf rock, rockabilly, garage sound that just really culminates into that noise.
I hear that, and I hear Stooges, I hear MC5, I hear Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers. I got
Oh,
some
thank you.
Ventures. I mean, yeah, like you just outlined everything that I feel like I'm hearing echoes of, but it's such a mashup of all those styles that it works on a whole different level. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
I really appreciate that. I also probably should mention one of my all-time favorites. I mean, the Doors are definitely up there. But probably one of my largest influences, writing wise and playing wise too, and we can get into that if you want, is the Velvet Underground, and just everything that comes out of that wheelhouse of Lou Reed and just like dark alternative music of the late 60s. I mean, that is really where my like heart always sits, and something I always turn back to.
Yeah, so tell me about the songwriting process. Have you written all the songs, or most? Like, what's the breakdown rather of who's written what on the record?
Yeah, so three of those songs on there, if you're going through, the first song, the song right in the middle, and the last song are called Sun God. Those were an instrumental jam that were written by my drummer Dan, the one that I connected with over the OCs and the new garage movement. His song is also Dying to See You, and the song Money in Hell. Um, Everything else on there was written by me. I think I did most of the music for it. The song Freak Power, the last song on the album, was the lyrics are by me, and the tune was written by my guitar player Nate. But for the most part, a lot of what the songwriting process looks like for me is that I will either be jamming on something, or I will, have a riff, or I'll have, some chord progression, and I'll say, oh, I'm going to start writing some lyrics to it. And usually I have found that most of the songs I write in like 10 to 15 minutes. And it's this quick paced thing of, here's a riff I like, here's something really cool that I've done, let me write lyrics to it. And then I bring the lyrics to my band, and I bring the tune to my band. I go, hey, I was screwing around on this. Like, this is the chord progression that I have. Like, why don't you guys like write something to it? And within 30 minutes, we have a song written and fleshed out. I have been playing ever since the first iteration of my band, which I can't even really go through how many iterations. We've changed so many members over a period of like 3 or 4 years. But with the first iteration of my band, it was me and my guitar player and a very close friend of mine, Kevin, who helped me really start the band and gave me the confidence to like even play guitar well enough. And it was really me coming to him and saying, oh, like, I've got this tune to it, and him going, okay, well, like, let me play this over it. And then, Dan would come in and he'd say, okay, well, like, I can do this on drums. And the current iteration that we have, it sits at 6 members. So we have lead guitar player, I play rhythm guitar and do lead vocals, bass player, a keys player, a percussionist, and a drummer. When we were at our largest, we also had a sax player and another guitar player. Pretty much the writing process has always sat about the same, in that, I bring things to them. I work with musicians that are musically competent enough and really like very creative. Which is something that I mean, I can't say enough good things about the guys that I write with, because they really turn ideas that I have into the actual song. And so I always have enough faith when I'm writing with them that, you know, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to catch the sound. They're going to know what to do. And I mean, do I ever have like riffs that I think that maybe like a bass should be playing or that a guitar should be playing? Yeah. But for the most part, it's very free range. I give everybody the play space to really do what they want with the skeleton format that I kind of bring. I'm very much like a 1-4-5 writer. You know, if it sounds fine like that, I don't need to overcomplicate it too much. I like to. I wish that I could, you know, play the jazz, you know, sound or do enough complicated chord progressions, but I know what my talent is and where my talent level sits, and it's not anything more complicated than, you know, maybe 5 chords and a bridge. So
sometimes less is more, right? I mean, and that shows through in the music.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you guys have a really good collaborative sort of way of working, and you know, like a democratic songwriting process, which is really cool. I was in a band in my early 20s, and we started out doing covers. It was my first band, and sort of the same trajectory as you, where I didn't really have the confidence that I was good enough to be in a band. But I was working at a small computer integrator in South Jersey, and we had a customer come in, and he was using some computer stuff in his studio, which happened to be in the same building where we were. So the owner was friends with him because, you know, they had been in the same building, you know, as businessmen for years or whatever. And, you know, brought him back and introduced him to me and said, hey, you know, this is Joe. And, you know, he's got some issues, you know, you're going to help him out with stuff. So he invites me upstairs to the studio that I didn't even know existed. And we get to talking, and I'm like, hey, you know, I play guitar. And he was like, you do? He's like, oh, I'm trying to put a band together. And I'm like, whoa. I'm not that good. I'm not that quality. And he was like, he goes, do you know like 5 chords? And I'm like, I probably know 6 chords. And he goes, just bring your guitar, come Saturday night, hang out with me and the drummer and the bass player. If you suck, we'll try to get you better. You know, if you're halfway decent, you're in the band. It's like, we're just hanging out, having a good time, jamming, and no pressure, you know, whatever. So I was like, okay. So he gave me like 3 or 4 songs to learn, which I did. And I was in the band, like, you know, pretty much from that point on. I think I was, you know, not great, but I was good enough, I guess, with the 6 chords that I knew to sort of get started. And I learned a lot from those guys, you know, and not only just, you know, how to be in a band, how to play, but also musical taste, because they were a little bit older than I was. So, you know, I was like 23, 24, I think. And these guys were all like pushing 40. Yeah. Right. So it was like, you know, half a generation apart in terms of music. So I was bringing in at the time, you know, all the post grunge stuff like Stone Temple Pilots and Hole and Nirvana and, you know, all those things. And these guys were like, you know, Hendrix and Rush and Buddy Miles and Grand Funk Railroad. So yeah, I got this great education of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have learned or listened to on my own. And then at one point we decided that we were going to do originals. Yeah. Right. So we started the same process where one guy would bring a song idea in. I wasn't really comfortable with writing or coming up with ideas, but I think where my strong suit was I was firmly a rhythm guitar player. Joe, the guy that I mentioned, was this amazing lead guitarist. He could play almost anything. You know, he could play jazz stuff. He could play metal, you know, classic rock, blues. He was very versatile. And he had a lot of great ideas and a lot of, you know, he'd come in with a riff and start playing. And the bass player was also another great musician. He would kick in with a bass line. The drummer would fire off, and I'd be standing there like, what do I do? Yep. For a few minutes. But then once the groove kind of kicked in and I felt what they were doing, I was like, okay, you know, they're playing in this key, or this is, you know, these are the chords. So I would just start to weave in little rhythm parts in between. And like, you know, either Joe would look at me and smile, or he would look at me and be like, raise an eyebrow, like, what the hell are you playing? You know, he was very opinionated, which was great because, you know, it sort of helped me, you know, learn. So over time, we wrote, I think we had like 6 or 7 originals. And they were largely instrumental. And then we brought this guy in who, we decided we needed like an actual lead singer because we used to take turns just, you know, singing on the cover songs. Mm-hmm. So he came in, and I remember this guy, his name was Wayne. Can't remember his last name to save my life, and it was so long ago, but, he had lived in LA for a while and was in a Motley Crue cover band. And I think he was in a Bon Jovi cover band. And his voice, I mean, he had that like high, sort of high pitched heavy metal
Yeah.
shriek kind of thing to him, but he could do other stuff as well. So, you know, he was just an interesting dude. And, he came in and started writing some lyrics to some of the songs. And I'm sorry to say, we never did full studio recordings in the studio of any
Hmm.
of them, but I did record a couple of jam sessions, and somewhere I have those on cassette. I have to dig them out and digitize them because I remember some of
Yeah.
the songs were actually pretty decent. But same thing where it was like, you know, I think over time we all just sort of learn how to sort of play off each other's strengths and work together. So it was really
Yeah.
interesting.
If you ever find those tapes, you got to send them over to me. I want to hear.
I might, you know, I'm gonna, if I find them, I'm gonna post them online.
Heck yeah.
Because I mean, well, maybe not all of them. I think some of them are, you know, some of the rehearsals were not great, but we'll see.
That's all right. I feel like there's something like I have gotten to a point. There was a long period of years where I didn't like any live tracks that I ever heard bands do, and I mean for a while too. Like I was deep diving into Grateful Dead, and I mean, so much of the Grateful Dead is like, oh, what year do you like, you know, Scarlet
Right.
Begonias from, or you know, like
What show?
what's your, yeah, like what's your favorite row Jimmy, like you know, from the 1973, like I didn't really like non-studio recording. I didn't get it,
Me
and
too.
then really in like the last like probably 3 years after playing live, I started to really appreciate listening to bands play live. So I had gotten into Frank Zappa in 2020, and that was, man, you want to talk about like a slow march and actually like shock exposure therapy for like a band. I dipped my toes into Frank Zappa like 8 times before I was finally like, I think there's something here. I
Yeah.
just need to listen more. And I had really gotten into like, you know, some of his studio stuff, because the studio stuff is, I mean, incredible. But what's even more incredible is listening to how he recreates that live. And there is like so much good live recording
Oh yeah.
of his stuff. And then just diving from there into, you know, other bands. I mean, like I mentioned, I'm a huge Velvet Underground fan. Um, and you mentioned Jonathan Richman. There's a really cool interview that he does where it's an hour of him on some Boston radio, and he's talking the entire time about Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. Like
Of
he
course.
doesn't mention his own music. He maybe mentions his stuff like once or twice in relation to like how they let him open for, or how they let him open for them, or like, you know, something like that. But he just talks about seeing them and what an experience it was. And I'd never really listened to them live. And to go back, and I mean, of course, I've listened to Velvet Underground and Nico more times than I can count. White Light, White Heat is one of my all-time favorite albums. So is Loaded. But to hear those songs played live and to really like be able to understand like no overdubs are happening. This is four people on a stage doing this, one, maybe one microphone, if not just like somebody holding a recorder somewhere.
Right.
Like, and to just hear like how much noise they can get and how like disgusting they can feel and how free jazz and free jam they can get, like, is incredible, and was incredibly inspiring too, of just like, you know, seeing what it was like to do that live. And it gave me a lot of especially finishing up this album. You know, we've now gotten to a place of doing all of these tracks live, and we were playing all of them live anyway, but the album has a ton of overdubs on it. It's got a ton of guitar parts put together. It's got a ton of, you know, different noises and overdubs of my vocals and all else. And like we started practicing for our album release show, and we were turning some of these songs into different like jams. And so songs like Wasting My Time, Ground Soup, I think it's like fourth or fifth on the album. We had never played that song live. That was a song that we did as a jam one time. It was me, our percussion player, our guitarist and I think our bass player, like screwing around with it one time, and we made this song. I had written lyrics shortly after the East Palestine train derailment, which is like 60 some miles from us, and I was sitting next to a tanker train on the highway one day, and I just got this anxious feeling, and I started writing. And then I went to a practice that day. They started jamming on this, chord progression, and I started singing these lyrics over it. And then we basically shelved the song and never touched it again. And so then we're talking about songs that we want to put on the album. I say, oh, let's put Ground Soup on it. Never played it, never did anything with it. So it's like we're ham-fisting our way through, like, well, what do we do with it? Like, we know that this is the chord progression, we know that this is what it sounds like, and so we just started adding noise to it. But when we started playing it live and when we started practicing for our album release show, we turned the end of it into this like high-paced punk jam, and it just like I mean, it really is this like it's a showpiece, it's a finale piece basically for us now. And it replaced our old finale piece, the Munhall Man. And just it has now become like really a staple of our set, and kind of a staple in the direction that we're moving as a band.
That's a great story. And I love that, like you said, you kind of just had this idea, kind of put it together as a jam, recorded it probably at the 11th hour. And so many bands have done that where they've like, okay, we have 6 really great songs and we need like 2 more to make an album. We're kicked out of the studio tomorrow at 3 p.m. Anybody got anything?
Yeah.
I can't think of any examples, but I know there's been more than once that I've read a retrospective or an article about an album and they're like, oh, that was a total throwaway. I wrote it in 5 minutes,
Yep.
And the song became like either a massive hit or just like a massively respected song, as an album cut or whatever.
Right.
And it just fascinates me that, sometimes creativity strikes, when you least expect it and when you're not sort of planning to make a thing out of it. Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it also gives a lot of light to the idea that like time doesn't necessarily make music better or art better. There's no amount of like there's not so many hours that you have to put in before it's like, oh, you've made a masterpiece. It just it just happens. And you can't like what I've always found is that the more that I'm throwing effort at a song, or the more that I'm like trying to make it just right or perfect or whatever else, that is when it starts to like completely A, lose interest for me, and B, just not even sound that great. The songs that, like I said, the songs that I've written that I consider to be some of the best ones that I've written, I think I wrote in under 15 minutes, lyrics and tunes all together.
Wow. I just wanted to go back to, you mentioned Frank Zappa too. Same thing happened with me in the sort of journey to appreciate Zappa. I think when I was 14, maybe 15, my cousin had a cassette of Joe's Garage.
Oh, yeah.
So, and of course, we listened to Why Does It Hurt When I Pee over and over again because it was funny, right?
Yeah.
And we knew every word to that song and every word probably on that side of the cassette or whatever. And then it wasn't until I was in this band with the older bass player who was a huge progressive rock and fusion kind of fan. He turned me on to some more Zappa. He gave me a copy of Apostrophe. So,
oh yeah.
Sort of same thing, right? Like the sort of, continuing gateway into Zappa was the humor, right? It was like Don't Eat the Yellow Snow, Nana Grubs It. I'm going to butcher the name of the song, but it's the St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast.
St. Alfonso's Pancake Breakfast.
Yeah, right? And these are like hysterical songs, but then when you really sit and ignore the funny lyrics and listen to what's underneath, unreal. And I'm in the same camp as you. I'm really a studio guy. I've not seen a lot of bands that I love live for that reason, because to me, it's like the studio versions always trump the live playing. But I think as I got older and maybe a little wiser, I started to realize, like you said, like there's certain things that you can't do in a studio. There's just certain directions that a song can take, whether it's a jam band dragging something out for 15, 20 minutes, or whether it's just, over time, songs evolve a little bit, right? Like bands will start to play them a little bit differently. They'll add stuff to the end of it. They'll change a lyric here and there. I mean, it's happened to, I think, a lot of, popular songs, because let's face it, I think a lot of bands get tired of playing the same hits night after night, right? And a lot of times they want to change it up a little bit.
Right.
But, again, I credit my bass player, Bill, which, Bill, if you ever see this, hit me up. But Bill was responsible for a lot of my musical education, I think, in my early 20s. He turned me on to, I knew Velvet Underground. I'd listened to a bunch by that point. But he turned me on to Lou Reed's live album.
Oh yeah.
The extended version of Sweet Jane with that sick, like 10-minute intro or however long. It's like, probably 3-4 minutes of intro with the dueling guitar leads before you get into the actual song. And, just opened my eyes to all that stuff. Right. So, and the Band of Gypsies album. So I was a huge Hendrix fan in college. When I really started to play guitar, it was Hendrix, it was Jimmy Page, it was Clapton, it was all the usual 60s guitar heroes for me early on. But I didn't know that Hendrix did a trio album with Buddy Miles and Billy Cox, right? So hearing that for the first time, and it's a live album. I think at some point there had been studio versions of a couple of the tracks that were released, posthumously or whatever. But that album to me is like still one of my favorites, and it's live. And I can't imagine some of those songs in any other format, right? Because of just how great they came together with those three guys just pretty much jamming on stage, right? Some of the tracks are like 11, 12 minutes long,
right?
And they could go on forever, and I wouldn't mind.
Right. Exactly. Well, and Hendrix is such a case too, where it's like, I can't remember what I was just watching about him, where it talks about Eric Clapton's reaction to seeing Hendrix for the first time, and he's basically just like, "Well, I didn't know he was that good." Like this unadulterated like understanding of the blues, better than any single person in the UK scene at that time. You feel that he knows how to use a guitar better than anybody. And it sometimes hurts to listen to, because you're like I could do that. In theory, I could do that, but it's not going to be as good as him. Nothing I could do would be as good as him.
No, it's like Prince. Prince, I feel like the guitar was like an extension of his hands. You know what I mean? An extension of his soul. Like there was no delineation between him and the instrument. Like it was just that seamless. And I think, Hendrix was obviously the same way.
Right. No, absolutely. See, that's why I take a lot from the school of Lou Reed, which is, Lou Reed is a very talented guitar player, and there is something to be said about that. And I've listened to a lot of his later stuff, and I again, huge Velvet fan, so like all of that stuff is really the things that I always gravitate towards. But the man uses a guitar much like a child uses a noisemaker. Yeah. Like it's very much this percussive hitting the guitar. And when I talk to people about, what I do in a band, all I tell them is like, oh, I just hit the guitar with my hand a whole lot. Like I make the same chord shape, I slide it up and down, and I'm just banging on it. Like, which is only about 50% a lie. I do change chord shapes a little bit. I got the A shape too, so it's not just all E. But it is a lot of that, and it really does. I feel like everybody has to have some like teacher in that, or some kind of like master within who they're following and what their sound works itself out to. And I think that I feel like Hendrix has been a huge one for so many of the great guitar players to, come out of post 1960s.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's a benchmark. Love or hate the guy for his politics, but Clapton, same thing. Although he ripped off a lot of what everybody else was doing, I feel like back in the day, I didn't realize that, but I think listening to it, some of his stuff is derivative. But you can't deny Cream as another power trio that was just like, off the charts with talent for the brief moment that they were out recording.
Well, exactly. And to hit on that too, like, did he take a lot of blues from a lot of different people? Absolutely. The Animals did, the Rolling Stones did, the Beatles, like everybody was. Sure. They did it. Cream did it so much. I won't say so much better, but they did do it a lot better than a lot of those bands too, because they just had the talent with it. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't deny Jack Bruce, or for that matter Ginger Baker, within like the powerhouse of Cream.
Yeah,
So
oh no, for sure. And I'm a Jimmy Page stan. So out of all the '60s British guitarists, British blues rock guitarists, Page is my favorite. He's a sloppy motherfucker. Like on
oh
on
yeah,
record, he's a little more controlled because he had a little more time and effort put in the studio and like the layering of all these guitar parts and all the
yeah,
overdubs and stuff. But live, I mean, half the time
terrible.
his guitar's half out of tune and he's
I know.
all smacked out of his mind and can't even see straight, let alone play, right? So, I mean, again, like, I think this goes back to what we talked about, like studio versus live. Like listening to Zeppelin on a pair of headphones, like all the stuff they did in the studio and how the recordings were done. It's like revolutionary. And
Right.
then you listen to, a bad night of Zeppelin playing live and you're like, ew, God, they suck.
Yeah. I
you
I
know?
listened to I think it was Dean Ween talking about how much he loved Jimmy Page, and then he talks about like how poorly he plays live. I never knew that, and like went and listened to some of his live stuff and was just, I mean, I was like laughing. I had this thought of myself, because now, I mean, I was playing rhythm guitar for the entirety of the start of my band, right? And now I'm at a point where I'm really trying to figure out playing lead lines and really trying to like move in that direction. And it kind of gave me this weird confidence of like, well, if Jimmy Page can go out there and just absolutely demolish it every single time, like who cares what I'm doing, man? I could just screw around. And that's also, I mean, the other side of it too is, I don't know if you're familiar with the OCs and John Dwyer, but like his playing sometimes can be really sloppy too. I mean, it's a lot of it is very much like, blues progressions and like fast rock progressions, but it's like every now and then he'll just decide to stop hitting notes and he'll just like start sliding up and down the guitar and making noise on it. And it's the most like beautiful cacophony of noise ever. And it really, I feel like we give so much weight to like a really clean recording of, a band in the studio playing their best song, playing it absolutely perfectly and playing it. I mean, like I think of bands like Steely Dan, right? That it's like everything is so, it's not fake, right? But you're doing like 8 hours of takes on some of the things that they're writing, that like it's like, well, yeah, it's impossible for you to pick a bad take at that point.
Right.
So, yeah.
But their bands. I mean, they're maybe a bad example because their live bands are just airtight as well. But that's a whole other discussion for a different time. While we're talking about playing sloppy on purpose, by the way. And you mentioned this beautiful cacophony. That's Sonic Youth to me. I don't know if you're a Sonic Youth
Oh,
fan.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've dipped my toes in a little bit.
but I don't know if talking about playing sloppy on purpose. I see from your Instagram that you're a punk fan, and you mentioned some punk references. So let's go on the other side of virtuosity and perfection, and talk about the real, three chords and who gives a shit, bang on the guitar, make great music. What are some of your punk influences and some of your favorites there?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned the Stooges. I mentioned the MC5. I cannot talk about writing music or playing the guitar without talking about Poison Ivy Rorschach from the Cramps.
Cramps, yeah.
And you want to talk about like simplistic, easy to like digest guitar playing, and yet so badass at the same time. She doesn't miss. And when, I mean, like, I'm trying to think, when their first albums are coming out, she's not even been playing the guitar that long. Like,
Right.
I think they formed in like 73, and she picked up a guitar that year and is like playing guitar. And so by like, 77, when they start recording stuff, or 78 or whenever, I mean, really, like, she is a relatively new guitar player
Yeah.
while she is playing. And there is something to be said about, and I actually talked to my my lead guitar player about this at one point. There's something to be said about just playing a pentatonic scale, and
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with that.
That's about
And
all I
so
can play.
when we got when we auditioned my lead guitar player, he came in and he had this huge pedal board and he had this reverend guitar, and he really like knew his stuff, right? But at the core of what he was doing for every song was he's just playing blues progressions.
Yeah, sure.
And I mentioned this to him one day, and he said to me, he said, I've tried out for enough bands that, you show up and you're playing the most complicated thing you can play, and all the guys are going, yeah, that's all right. And then you just play something simple, and everybody's like, that's great. That's some good guitar playing right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, definitely the Cramps. Definitely. And again, I mean, I wouldn't even consider them to be like a sloppy band. There's sloppy elements, but the Dead Kennedys, I mean,
His guitar parts they sound a little simplistic when you listen, and you've got that like breakneck speed, punk rock, hardcore driving sound to them, but just try to play some of the shit that he's playing. Not only the technicality, but the technicality at that speed. It's like,
right.
My God.
And the other thing too, and I've listened to interviews with him, really wasn't playing with many pedals. I mean, it was,
Right.
1978, 79, whenever they are first getting together, not playing with a ton of pedals, no, not a ton of effects going on. He's not, washing out his guitar. His influences are, rockabilly and surf rock and punk, and it shines through in such a beautiful way. I mean, like that's a huge influence to my personal style of playing. But like the ability to just take something easy and overcomplicate it is a very, very awesome thing. But like I'm trying to think who else. Dead Kennedys. Um, I oh wow. Of course, as soon as you ask me, then my mind goes blank, right? I do like Black Flag.
Yeah.
A very, very classic, punk band lover. I fell into like Reagan Youth when I was a post grad. I started to really like the like 1980s or 1990s punk movements. I mean those are really some of the big ones for me especially. I mean punk is such a wide genre of varying sound. The Clash, I mean another one, right? Like it's one of those things of like, you sometimes you can't go wrong with the classics. I will admit, I am a Clash guy over the Sex Pistols. I think the Sex Pistols are trash. It's a hard stand.
They were, but they were manufactured trash, right?
Yep.
So I mean, that's the beauty of it.
Yep.
Have you seen they did like a mockumentary sort of thing? I forget what it was called now, but it was basically like the story of the Sex Pistols and how the whole thing started.
No.
I will find the name of it and I'll send it to you, but I'll put it in the show notes for anybody who might be listening or watching, because it was really well done. I feel like it was like a miniseries kind of thing. And it's, they talk about how the band formed, but they dig into like how Malcolm McLaren was just always looking for the next big thing and,
right.
Trying to sort of capitalize on, shock value of everything that he did. What I didn't realize was how deeply involved some other sort of, figures from that time period were, like Chrissie Hynde. I had no idea that she was like intimately involved with the band. I think she dated or, fooled around with Steve Jones for a long time. So I learned a lot. It was cool. I always loved the Sex Pistols, but for me, punk was like the teenage rebellion kind of thing for me.
Right.
But then after I got over that part of it, really appreciating the music and the politics and sort of all the different bits and pieces behind it. Dead Kennedys is still one of my favorite bands.
Oh yeah.
What are your favorite Kennedys albums or songs?
Oh geez. So my favorite album, and I think it's always a faux pas for some people, but I'm not a man of faux pas. I'll always openly admit to what I know and what I don't know and what I like and what I don't like. Um, my favorite is probably their compilation, Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death. Um, Otherwise, it's probably Fresh Fruit and Rotting Vegetables. I do also have a copy of Plastic Surgery Disasters, and that is probably a close second as far as like favorite albums. Plastic Surgery Disasters specifically because of the songs like Forest Fire or
Yeah.
uh, um, Winnebago Warrior, Buzz Bomb. I mean, just these really like very like weird, and I mean, you can't talk about them without talking about Jello Biafra and his fucking lyric writing, because I mean, like,
Amazing.
just yeah, I mean, just really hits like such a scratch in the back of the head, and it's that like perfect cusp of like hardcore and punk that like is happening at that time, right? And it's still like what I enjoy hardcore. I have a friend actually who's in a hardcore band now that like I go to more hardcore shows now because that's really what I mean. Pittsburgh is very much a metal, a punk, and a hardcore scene,
Sure.
right? Like there and a lot of indie rock, right? So you get a lot of these like weird fusion bands. But I've grown an appreciation for hardcore. I still don't listen to it in my own free time because at the end of the day, I'm a lyricist. I write. Like a lot of what is important to me is the lyrics to songs. Um, I just can't like always, no matter what, like somebody tells me. Are we back?
Yeah, we are now.
Oh,
You
good.
go.
Okay, sorry, somebody called me.
Yeah, no worries.
No matter what, like somebody tells me, like, oh, these guys are a very political band, right? It's like if I'm only catching bits and pieces of it, it's like it's not doing it the same way, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, some of my favorite Dead Kennedys songs are those three that I said. Night of the Living Rednecks is a really
Oh
good one that
God, that's the
it's
best.
so good. It's not even a song. It's just some weird like story bit that he does in the middle of it. You know, who doesn't love California Uber Alice or like Too Drunk to Fuck or like those songs just really sit at a special place. But I think my favorite is probably Pull My Strings.
Oh,
Um,
I love Pulled My Strings.
you know,
You know the whole
anytime
story behind when they played that live, right?
right. Right, of course. I mean, like the very idea of being called a new wave band in that time, and then saying like, you know what, fuck all of this. We're not even gonna play the song that everybody wants us to play. We're gonna do something different. Like, it's just that is the ultimate punk move right there, and it's so badass. Like, it's great, and the shirts too with the dollar signs on them
The
too that they
dollar
wore for
signs,
that.
yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
I wish there was
amazing.
video or film of that, but I guess
I know.
there wasn't.
I know. I know.
There's photos of them wearing the S shirts
Yep.
with the ties. So I'll link that up and link an article to the story about that because that was like the biggest fuck you I think ever to the music industry. It was
Yep.
great.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, like I'm also a hardcore fan, maybe not as much as I used to be, but same thing. Like, you know, I don't like overt politics in my face in music. It depends. I mean, you know, sometimes okay, but I think with the Dead Kennedys, it was more, it was subtle and there was humor. So yes, it was very political and it was very, you know, anti right wing or whatever, but
Hmm.
always served up with a huge dose of sarcasm and like a wink and a nudge. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
So, you know,
I'm very much from the camp of folk music too. So you wouldn't believe it from listening to our album. But we really, when we started, we were not like really even a punk band. I mean, like, and I don't consider us to be a punk band as is. And if anybody from the Pittsburgh punk scene heard me call us a punk band, I'd probably get thrashed. But we really started as this weird like folk kind of vehicle, folk country rock with punk elements and like punk feel to it, right? But a lot of my love and a lot of lyrical um inspiration that I've gotten through the years has been through folk writers, especially, I mean, like Dylan era, but very much the like even earlier than that, like 40s, like the first folk movement that hits America, and Greenwich Village, and the playing in why am I blanking on the name of the park? Playing at the Square in Central Park, like that folk movement is very influential to what I first started doing, and really where I would go with it. I mean, I still really write like that. And recently I started taking voice lessons again, and I summed up my problem with singing as I'm singing folk lyrics in the time signature of a punk song. So I'm fitting as many words as I can into like, a beat that's going dun 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 dun, and I was running out of breath basically. I mean, 90% of what the problem with my singing technique was that I wasn't breathing enough.
It's tough. There were a few songs, the band that I mentioned sort of changed members. That basically the bass player and I kind of left and formed a whole different thing with a different drummer and another guitar player. And went through a couple different singers over that iteration of the band, and focused on covers after that because where I lived, like there was really no big original music scene, and everything was sort of different. But we did some songs. I sang a lot of lead vocals in that band, and some of the songs like we used to do "Down" by 311. That's a bitch, and it's sort of singing, sort of half rapping, but like we did Semi Charm Life by Third Eye Blind, all stuff that was on the radio,
Right.
or whatever when the band was around. But same thing, like, I wasn't a trained singer. I'm not a trained singer. And, getting through those lyrics and that rapid fire kind of, half singing, half rapping, like it took a lot of practice to get that where I could get through the whole thing without like sort of like gasping for breath,
Right. No, it's a lot. And I mean, I do, it's funny because I feel like the album does not reflect, what our live performances are like. And it was something that I kind of touched on earlier when we were talking, but I had to kind of come to grips with that, of like writing these songs that are going to be different from the album versions versus what we do live. And so much of what our live performance is like is very very tactile. It's lots of movement, it's lots of singing, it's lots of screaming, it's lots of doing weird things that we like, just experimenting. It's always just a big experiment on stage every night. So I've really come to kind of respect, again, this is one thing that I do respect about hardcore, and especially like metal singers, is I've come to respect what they do with their voice and how they do it, and like the amount of vocal fry that goes into it, versus just your standard like pop singing, or your standard just light, airy singing. I mean, that can all be very impressive, but to see somebody do something very vocally intense and not strain themselves and come up to you afterwards and be able to talk to you is, really incredible.
Yeah, and it's training and it's practice, right? Because you have to be able to get through, like you said, get through an hour, 2 hour show and not blow out your voice, because you have to do it again the next night and the next night and the next night. So, it's unreal. I have nothing but respect for trained singers. In fact, one of the singers in the last iteration of the band was actually an opera singer.
Wow.
And she quit because she felt that she was ruining her voice, singing rock and roll stuff, in a smoky bar.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So she was like, "Hey, I can't keep doing this. It's messing up my voice for my real, love of singing." So,
right.
Yeah.
I was a musical theater kid. I mean, I did geez. I did about 10 years of theater. I have about like 5-ish, maybe plus years of vocal training that I did. But the things that I was singing when I was, doing all of that was I was singing show tunes. I was singing, Sweeney Todd, and I'm singing, these songs that are not punk songs. They're not folk songs. I'm not singing, like I'm singing what people want to hear out of Broadway and what people want to hear out of musicals, which is a very specific sound. And it's certainly I have no FOMO about not being a musical theater adult. Um, but it's yeah. I mean that is it was a jump from what I was doing, and it was. I mean, I started taking lessons again because I could tell that if I was not going to do that, this would not be a sustainable thing for me. So I had to kind of jump on top of that. And that's just how it goes. There's a right and a wrong way to sing, and that's why some punk bands only last about a year and a half.
Right. And you know what? Why they cancel shows after, a couple of really intense ones.
Right. Right.
Great. So what else did you want to cover? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I want to do the smash or pass of the Steely Dan albums, man. I saw it last week and I was so excited by it. And then you were like, I'm really trying to move away from this being a Steely Dan podcast while you wear your Becker Fagan shirt. I can see it. You can't hide from me.
I'm not even trying to hide it. It's just that, and I've told the story a bunch of times, but I'll tell it again for anybody who's tuning in for the first time. I did not start this podcast as a Steely Dan podcast. How this sort of happened was I have this meme page on Instagram, Memes of the Dan. It got a crazy amount of followers and sort of
I didn't
engagement.
know you were Memes of the Dan.
That's me.
I didn't realize that. I'm talking to a legend here. Holy shit.
That's a dubious legend to be a part of. But so I started shit posting stuff on Reddit and Twitter a couple years back. Really got into the whole Steely Dan community thing over COVID, really. Made a lot of great connections with people on social media. And I had accumulated a bunch of memes that I made. And I have a whole folder of, ones that I just saved because they were funny that other people made. And I was like, hey, I'm not really seeing any meme pages that are super active that are dedicated to this. Let me start one just for the fun of it and see what happens. So, I had 20, 30 memes sitting in a folder on my computer. I just posted one every day. And before you knew it, I had 500 followers and I was getting thousands of views on things. And
yeah.
It's fun. I think it's sort of coming to its, I don't want to say its end, but it's slowing down a lot because, how many more original memes can I come up with before I start repeating myself? But anyway, all that to say is right around this time, last year, around the same time, I was like, all right, fuck it. I'm starting a podcast. I have this music blog that I want to get off the ground. I think a podcast would be fun. I just want to meet people, talk about music. I don't care what we talk about, whether it's bands, whether it's guitar, whether it's, whatever, anything goes, right? So I came up with this stupid name, Aural Mess. And it took me almost a year to actually get my shit together and get the motivation to really do the podcast. So this whole Memes of the Dan experience sort of springboarded me into this because I met other people that were Steely Dan fans and I found myself having these great conversations with them.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to start the podcast. And right around the time when I had that sort of flash of inspiration again, I met Phil, Steely Phil.
Uh-huh.
And Phil was like, hey, anybody want to come on my new podcast? I want to start having guest hosts. So I just like, yeah, I'll do it. Sure. Why not? So I was his first actual guest and I had such a blast doing it. I'm like, all right, that's it. Starting the podcast, recording my first episode next week. So I reached out to a few people and said, hey, you want to come on? You want to talk about music? And of course they were all Steely Dan people from the meme page.
Right.
So anyway, everybody for the first, 10 episodes or 11 episodes or so have really been hot to talk about Steely Dan.
Yep.
and we've had other things interspersed, and I've tried to keep the conversation pretty general, but I'm getting to the point now where like I want to branch out.
Right.
I don't want to keep doing. Yes, we can talk about Steely Dan. Yes, we can absolutely mention things and tie it into other topics. But
Of
I want it
course.
to be less of a focus and more
Yeah.
of an occasional thing. So even if I wear the shirt and I geek out.
No, I feel I have to tell you something, and
Yes.
I can't prove this. Okay, in 2017, I started a Steely Dan meme page because there was not one. I couldn't find one anywhere. Okay, so I went on Facebook, and it's still up. It's called Deacon Blues Posting, and
Okay.
I made what I believe to be the first Steely Dan meme page. And there's like maybe like 8 memes on there that I had made myself. I cannot prove to anybody that I was the first Steely Dan meme page, but I'm like 90% sure that it might have been me.
You should grab those and put them on Instagram for everybody to see. I'm not on Facebook, so I won't. I mean, I can ask my wife to look it up, but
I'm going to send them to you so you can
you should.
repost them.
You should. I'll repost them, giving you full credit, obviously.
I will.
That's amazing. Yeah, I didn't become hip to Steely Dan memes as a thing until, like I said, probably around 2019, 2020,
Yeah.
right around the pandemic, I think is when I really started to notice it. And there's a lot of people that sort of came before. And Twitter's got a pretty big community of folks also, so it's great.
Yeah.
So listen, hey, you want to do a quick smash or pass?
I would love to do a quick smash or pass.
Give me. We Mackenzie and I did the 9 studio albums. I think we have time to get through all of them. So why don't you give me just a quick smash or pass on each one?
All right, let's do it.
All right. So Countdown to Ecstasy.
Oh, hard smash.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can't buy a. Can't buy a.
Oh, okay. All right. Let's, it's a.
I got excited.
I was. It's a smash. It's a light smash though. I'm gonna make it work for it. It's good. I love the Latin influence on it. You really can't go wrong with some of the songs on there. I mean, especially when I find myself humming "Only a Fool Would Say That." I mean, like it's a good one. I'll smash.
All right, great. Moving on to Countdown to Ecstasy.
Hard smash.
Yeah,
that is my all-time favorite Steely Dan album. Probably
Really?
next to the one that will come later that I will say hard smash to also. The combination of like the rock and jazz influence mixed together, as well as the lyricism in it, is so like it's so strange, and there's so many great like the song Razor Boy on it. Like, what a metaphor. Who would ever say the Razor Boy? Like, it's just just so good.
That way of describing death or the Grim Reaper, right, which is what we think it is, that could have come out in 2021 and been spelled BOI, right?
Yep, literally, and it could have been a
Gen
trap
Z
beat
meme
behind it. It could have had everything that like a song from now would work, and it would be great, and everybody would love it. I mean, like it's
sure.
great. There's such a timelessness to. I mean, generally Steely Dan, but anyway, I won't hold it up on Countdown to Ecstasy.
All right, let's move on. Pretzel Logic.
Pass. Never. Monkey in Your Soul is good. Pretzel Logic is fine. It's not enough for me to ever say hard smash. I've never been able to do that one enough, and it's definitely not one I ever gravitate towards if I want to listen to Dan.
I hear that. That album took a long time to register with me, and side 2, if you will, is a little bit of a throwaway for a lot of people. But I don't know. I've just grown to love it. So
yeah.
I think I'm still smash on that album for sure.
Fair enough.
Katie Lied.
That's a secret smash. That is one that like I always kind of sleep on. And then, like, I listened to it through, and I'm like, this is just nothing but bangers, man. Black Friday, Bad Sneakers. I mean, like, you can't really go wrong with it. Anything on there that has Chain Lightning on it too, right?
Yeah,
That's one of my all-time favorites. And does that doesn't does that have your gold teeth too?
It does.
I was gonna say which gold teeth one. I think that's really the one that sits for me, right? But gold teeth two still. So secret
That
smash, but yes,
that's a hot take. I mean, a lot of people like Gold Teeth 2 better. I like them equally, but for Gold Teeth 2 for me was probably Denny Diaz's crowning moment as a guitarist. That solo, he took bop and played it on the guitar, right? Which is
yeah,
really not hard to do, but just the way he laid it over that track. I mean, it's unreal. Like it's
yeah.
otherworldly.
I think lyrically, I prefer Gold Teeth one, especially. I mean, the opening line of "Got a feeling I've been here before" versus who are these children who scheme and run wild? Like it's just like oh, dude, come on, like. So I don't know. I'm a little biased, but like again, I am a Countdown stan, so
Yeah,
take
fair
it with a
enough.
grain.
Fair enough. All right, moving on to Royal Scam. Oh, Max, don't do it.
This is gonna be a hot take. I'm gonna pass. It's
Wow.
I know, and it's not. It's just it's not even because I dislike the album. It's not even because I don't like the songs that are on it. I like a lot of them, but it's never one that I go towards. It's never. It's a not. It's like Pretzel Logic. It's like as far as it. Pretzel Logic is bottom right for me, and then right below that or right above that one is probably Royal Scam.
Okay.
I know. I know.
All right.
Hot
Well,
take.
gotta go. Nice talking to you. No, I'm kidding. Uh,
That's fair. I would respect it if you ended it right here.
no, it's all good. Everybody has pretty strong feelings on their Steely Dan, and I appreciate all angles.
Yeah. Though Kid Charlemagne, total
Yeah.
banger. I mean, like you
Kid
can't.
Charlemagne and the Fez were probably the only two songs that I really dug on that album when I was younger. It took
Yep.
me a while to let the rest kind of come in. And I think over the years, as I got to understand their sort of progression in their songwriting and in their
Right.
recording processes and how the whole studio musician thing unfolded, I think I gained a deeper appreciation for like that album is a gateway. Asia and Gaucho couldn't have happened without Scam, right? I mean, you could say Scam
Totally.
couldn't have happened without the ones that came before it, but
Right.
really that album changed the band. Like Katie Lied was sort of, they were getting there and they brought in Jeff Porcaro but it was still at its core, it was still, I think I put Katie Lied as being closer to the previous three albums
Yeah.
than in relation to the other ones, right?
Right. It's
So,
well, and I mean, like again, like I, I. It's hard for me to say that because I do think about it. I think about the Fez, and I think about Haitian Divorce, and I think about the Royal Scam, and it's like those are hard songs to sleep on. I mean, they are good. They are good songs, but again, it's one of those things of like I never when I'm turning on an album, it's never the one that I turn to, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is about it.
I want you to go after this, go listen to Green Earrings, listen to the middle eight, and listen to the guitar solo, and then just do that.
See, now you're making me regret my decision. I forgot Green Earrings was on that one because that is Green Earrings is a favorite also. Well, I used to have my mom had a Steely Dan compilation album. I think I can't. It's the one that everybody knows, and I can't for the life of
Gold
me
or
think.
Decade or
Decade. And when I was in college, I got my first car. I like learned how to drive when I was 18, and I got I had a CD player in my car. Had a binder of CDs from my parents' car, and the one that was always in my CD player was that Steely Dan comp album, and I listened to all of those songs. Like I probably burnt like ruined the CD with how many times I listened to that album. So anyway,
yeah. All right, next up, Asia.
I mean, it's an obligatory smash, right? Like, I mean, really, like, there's a lot of Asia that like I don't necessarily like love, but there's so much. I mean, Asia, Deacon Blues, and Peg by themselves make that whole album a smash. I mean, you can talk about Black Cow. I mean, it's a great one. The other songs on it that fall out of those three are still fantastic. I love, and what I really do love about that album is the continuity in it. I mean, it really does, it keeps the same sort of sound to it. Like I don't know if I'm synesthetic. I don't think that I am, but like I do get colors whenever I listen to stuff. And for me, it does keep those same like very vibrant reds that whole time all the way through.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's a smash. I'm not gonna if listen, if I passed Royal Scam, I think somebody would find me and hunt me down if I said pass to Asia.
I think Asia's their least polarizing album. It's the one everybody can agree on, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not synesthetic either, but what you just said about the whole album being red makes a lot of sense to me on some level. So
Yeah.
I love that description. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah.
All right. So the last of the OGs.
Give it to me. Hard smash.
All right,
Hard
good.
smash.
You redeemed yourself.
I mean, I can't like that is the album that I always go to, right? Like if Royal Scam is the one, or if Pretzel Logic and Royal Scam are the ones that I never go to, Gaucho and Countdown are the ones that I always go to. I will always listen to Glamour Profession. I will always listen to Gaucho. I will always listen. I mean, like I just the album front to back for me is just it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I mean that fusion of like Latin with jazz with rock, I mean, just really shines through in such a beautiful way. I mean, I really like Gaucho, as the kids say, Gaucho hits.
Nice. Yeah. And I mean, I've said this a bunch of times, but I'll say it again. Just the instrumentation, I think, there's a lot of stuff going on this record that we didn't necessarily not hear before, but there are some elements that Gaucho brings that I think are just, sort of where things could have gone, from there had they not sort of decided that they needed that long break. So nice segue into post reunion albums, or reunion albums. So what about Two Against Nature?
Again, it's another one. It's like I never listened to it all that much.
Yeah.
I think I listened to it once and I was like, this is all right. Is Two Against Nature has Cousin Dupree on it, right?
It does.
I like Cousin Dupree. It's a fun one. There's something kind of cheeky about it. It's gross, but like it is. I'm gonna have to pass on that one though.
That was a pass for me too, but I want to. I'm gonna give you some more homework. I had this whole conversation. I think it was with Mackenzie, and I might have gotten to this with somebody else as well. So I'm old enough that I lived through the sort of, I was young when Gaucho came out. I was 8 years old, but I remember that following year when Hey 19 was all over the radio. It was a hit. I listened to it. I'm pretty sure I had it on a cassette that I had my little boom box and I was recording shit off the FM radio. So, and then growing up and falling into Steely Dan's back catalog and then finding out they were coming out with this new album and Two Against Nature drops. And I was super excited. And I went and got it and I brought it home and put it on and I was like, what the hell's this? Like, it didn't sound like Steely Dan. And at the time, to me, that was a bad thing, right? Looking back now, that was probably a really harsh appraisal. But over the years since then, I've been really resistant to that album.
Yeah.
And here's the homework, because this is what turned me on to those songs. Go listen to the live versions that they've played, after the album came out. So any of the tours from, I guess, 2001 onwards.
All right.
03, 06 were good years, I think. We're getting into that Grateful Dead thing. What show is it?
Yeah.
Was it good on? But those songs just need to breathe. I think they needed a live setting so that they weren't so airtight and, not airtight in a good way like Gaucho, but airtight in a bad way.
Yeah.
To me, too sterile, too, I don't know what the word is. Uh-oh, lost you again. Oh, there you are.
No, yeah.
But once I started to listen to some of these songs in the live shows that are obviously readily available on YouTube, I started to gain a bigger appreciation for them. So now listening to the album versions is better, right? So that's my take on that album.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
All right, so last one. Everything Must Go.
Another pass.
Really?
I gotta be honest. I don't know if I've ever even gotten through all of it. It's one of those one. I mean, it's like, I can appreciate that they're, doing the thing with it, right? Hey, sorry, my cat. Pickles. No, she's driving me nuts. I have a kitten at home. It. I don't know. I think I'm gonna pass on it, but I think I need to actually go back and give it the proper listen that it deserves. And I think I need to do that with Two Against Nature too. I feel like, I don't know. So for so long, I fell into this like loop of like, well, I really only like stuff that's like pre 1980s, and then like as a result of that, I just kind of checked out as that happens. So I think that I should go back and let them breathe a little more.
Yeah, I would.
Hey,
And
cool.
I do that with other bands too. Like there's some bands that I like the first half of their catalog and then not so much the later stuff.
Right.
So I get that.
Right. No, absolutely. But yeah. All right. Well, thank you for playing Smash and Pass and Steely Dan for me. That did make my night. I won't lie.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I'm always glad to hear anybody's take on all the albums. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, so on that note, Max, why don't we wrap up? I always have a final question that I like to throw at every guest because I think it's a good one. I've gotten some pretty good answers so far, so I'm going to pose it to you. We've just met. We talked a bit. I've got a good sense of sort of your musical tastes and some of your influences. But if there's one song that you absolutely love that I would never guess, like a real outlier in your sort of, personal music catalog, what would that song be?
Wow. Oh man. I almost wish that I would have known this question beforehand so that I could think on it. A song that you wouldn't expect. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge, I think for as much rock as I listen to and as much garage as I listen to and, 60s and 70s stuff that I listen to, I really do have a place in my heart with jazz. I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or not. I can't tell because we just had this whole Steely Dan conversation. A Night in Tunisia.
Yeah.
Charlie Parker.
Sure.
And there's one version that is Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, and I think that's probably it. No, you know what? I'm gonna give you a better one. It is it's Can I Kick It by Tribe Called Quest.
There you go. That's the answer I was looking for. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm a huge hip hop nut, so not a surprise. And there's so much of a parallel between that world and the punk and the garage rock and everything else. I feel like too. You want to hear mine, or at least mine?
Let me hear it.
Not a big country music fan, at least not modern country. I love me some Willie and Waylon and Dolly and Johnny Cash and Hank Williams Sr. But I'm not really into modern country, but I've come to gain an appreciation for some of the songwriting. And I'm particularly fond of Casey Musgraves, who's just a brilliant artist and songwriter, but she co-wrote the song Mama's Broken Heart for Miranda Lambert, who I would never purposely listen to on any other day. But that song, for some reason, just scratches an itch that I didn't know I had. I think it's the lyrics and it's the chorus, and a good song's a good song, right? Like no matter what the genre. But exactly. I feel like that's a song where, if somebody got to know me a little bit and heard Steely Dan and Led Zeppelin and Smashing Pumpkins and Buffalo Tom and Prefab Sprout and Lloyd Cole and all the major bands that I really love, if I turned around and hit them with that song on a playlist, they'd be like, huh?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that right there is proof that a love of music it can't really be defined by, what a genre is. And you can listen to as much as you want within any genre of music, But just because you like a genre or you really only listen to certain genres doesn't mean that like, that's the only thing you like. You just haven't found the other things that you're into yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I used to say guilty pleasure, but I feel like there's no such thing. If
There's
you
no
like what
guilt
you
in it.
like, yeah, exactly. You like what you like, and screw anybody that doesn't like it back.
Right? Exactly. No guilt needed. Guilt
That's
free.
right. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Max, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, man. This was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do it again. We can do the smash and pass on the solo albums at some point, and I'm gonna keep a close eye on your band, and next time you guys put music out, I'll have you back on to talk about that.
Heck yeah. Can I plug my stuff? Can I plug
Please do.
You can follow me at the Sunshine Superman on Instagram. You can follow my band. We're Sunny Daze and the Weathermen. You can find us at Sunny Daze DAZEPGH.com, or not .com, just PGH. If you're in the Pittsburgh area and want to buy a house, I'm a real estate agent. You can buy a house from me too, and I can fill your ear with knowledge about stupid garage rock and Steely Dan.
There you go. Love it.
There
All
it
right.
is.
Well, all right. Thanks again, man. Nice talking to you. And
Nice talking
we'll
to you
talk
too.
soon. All right.
Yep, absolutely.
Take care.